I work like a damned slave to provide for you, and I come home to be greeted by some kind of scarecrow. Right after the wedding, the husband showed his true face and laid down his condition. But the wife had no intention of accepting it quietly and decided to teach him a lesson. The June evening was slowly dissolving into the warm colors of sunset when Isolde stood by the window of her new apartment, gazing at the panoramic view of the sleepy city. 3 weeks ago, this place had seemed to her the most beautiful corner of the world. This was where her happy married life with Valentine was supposed to begin. Now, however, these walls, still smelling faintly of fresh paint, seemed to close in on her, turning the spacious two-bedroom apartment into a gilded cage. She ran her hand across the glass, leaving a barely visible trace, and remembered that very evening last summer when Valentine had proposed to her. He had knelt down in the same park now visible in the distance, his voice trembling with emotion as he told her how beautiful she was in her naturalness, how much he loved that she wasn't like those painted dolls he had met before. "You're my natural miracle," he had whispered, kissing her wind-chapped lips. And Isolde had believed every word, the way one believes in a fairy tale. Something hissed in the kitchen, pulling her back to reality. She hurried to the stove, where meat patties were browning in the pan, and potatoes with rosemary were roasting in the oven. She tried to cook something different every day, remembering her husband's recent remark that a true wife should know how to surprise her husband. Before, Valentine had devoured even her simple fried eggs with delight, assuring her that what mattered most was the love with which they were made. The apartment filled with the aromas of home-cooked food, mixing with the faint scent of the fading wedding bouquet that Isolde couldn't bring herself to throw away. The white roses and lilies stood on the windowsill. Their petals had lost their freshness, but for her, they still held the memory of the happiest day of her life. That wedding day now seemed like a dream, bright, beautiful, but unreal. Isolde looked at the clock. 6:30 p.m. Valentine would be home any minute. She quickly smoothed her hair, tied it up into a loose bun, and glanced at her reflection in the fridge door. Simple home clothes, soft jeans and a light t-shirt, a face without makeup, slightly flushed from the heat of the stove. The ordinary Isolde, just as she had always been, the woman Valentine had fallen in love with. The sound of keys in the lock made her heart beat faster. Not from joy, as before, but from a strange anxiety that had taken root over the past few days. Valentine crossed the threshold, and Isolde, as always, went to meet him, ready to hug and kiss her husband after his workday. He looked impeccable, as always. The dark gray suit fit him perfectly, the white shirt had not a single wrinkle, and the tie was knotted with mathematical precision. Even his hair, after a long day, remained perfectly in place, as if he had just stepped out of the barber shop. Isolde had always admired that ability of his, to look flawless under any circumstances, but now the contrast between his polished appearance and her simple domestic look struck her as painfully sharp. "Hi, darling," she began, rising on tiptoe for their usual kiss. But Valentine drew back. His brown eyes scanned her from head to toe, and in that gaze Isolde saw no trace of warmth, only something cold, assessing, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "And what is this supposed to mean?" he asked slowly, taking off his jacket and carefully hanging it over the back of a chair. Isolde blinked in confusion, not understanding. "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. Valentine loosened his tie. His movements were precise and controlled, as always, but irritation simmered beneath the surface. "Have you looked at yourself?" His voice was calm, almost even, but Isolde caught the metallic undertone in it. "How do you think you look? I come home after a hard day, and I'm greeted by—" He made an indeterminate gesture toward her. Isolde felt her cheeks burn with shame. She lowered her eyes, glancing down at her clothes as if trying to see what was so wrong. I was cooking dinner," she said quietly, as though apologizing. "I wanted to have everything ready when you came home." Dinner, Valentine repeated, walking past her into the living room. "And did you think about how you look? I work all day, representing our family," he threw over his shoulder, "and at home, I expect to be greeted by a wife, not whatever this is." The word stung, but Isolde tried to stay calm. Maybe he'd had a hard day. Maybe something had gone wrong at work. Valentine had always been demanding, with himself and with others, and that was one of the things that had once attracted her, his ambition, his drive for perfection. "Valentine, I don't understand," she said softly, following him hesitantly. "What's wrong? You used to like that I was natural, you said so yourself." "That was before," he cut her off sharply, turning to face her. "Now you're my wife, and I refuse to have dinner with a scarecrow. You should greet me wearing makeup and with your hair done." It's a basic sign of respect for your husband. The words burned like a slap. Isolde stood there, unable to believe that the man who had stood at the altar only a month ago, swearing he loved her for being different from everyone else, was now saying this. A scarecrow? She repeated in a trembling whisper. Valentine took off his watch and placed it carefully on the coffee table next to the TV remote. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic, as if he were performing some solemn rite. You just don't understand simple things, he said without looking at her. I'm a commercial director at a major company. I have a reputation, a status. My colleagues see my wife at corporate events, in restaurants. What will they think if they see you like this? But, we're at home, began Isolde. Especially at home, he interrupted, and again that metallic tone rang in his voice, one she had never heard before. Home is a reflection of the man. If a wife doesn't take care of herself at home, what does that say about her behavior in public? Isolde felt something tighten inside her. She remembered her day, working at the child care center, helping toddlers paint, offering them tea, comforting a little girl who couldn't finish her craft. Then taking the crowded bus home, standing in line at the store for the best ingredients for dinner. Coming home, straight to the kitchen, wanting to surprise her husband. And this was the result. I worked all day, she said barely above a whisper. Then I cooked for you. I wasn't thinking about makeup. I was thinking about making you happy. Valentine finally looked at her, and in his gaze she saw something frightening, cold disappointment, as if he were looking at a defective product. Isolde, we're adults, he said in the tone one uses to explain obvious things to a child. Everyone in a family has their responsibilities. Mine are to earn money, provide, maintain our status. Yours are to create comfort and be a worthy wife to a successful man. It's not that complicated. Worthy? Isolde echoed faintly. Yes, worthy. Well-groomed, beautiful, someone I can be proud of, someone I'm not ashamed to call my wife. The words fell like a sentence. Isolde stood in the middle of the living room, the same one where they had once planned their bright future together, and now she felt like a stranger in her own home. Her gaze fell on the wedding photograph standing on the dresser. In that picture, they were both smiling, happy, and in love. Valentine had his arm around her waist, and she was laughing with her head thrown back. Back then, she had believed the whole world belonged to them. All right, Isolde said finally, her voice unnervingly calm. I understand. Dinner's ready. Valentine nodded, as if she had finally said something sensible. Good. I'll take a quick shower and change. He was already heading to the bedroom when he stopped in the doorway. Next time, try to look appropriate. It's important for both of us. When he disappeared, Isolde sank onto the sofa and covered her face with her hands. Her ears were ringing, and a sticky feeling of shame and hurt spread through her chest. She tried to remember if there had been any signs of this attitude before, but only warm memories surfaced, how Valentine admired her natural beauty, said he was tired of artificial women, valued her sincerity and simplicity. Maybe he was right? Maybe she really should try harder? After all, they were husband and wife now, each had their own role. Many women took care of themselves even at home, greeting their husbands perfectly groomed. Perhaps that was normal, and she just hadn't understood it before. Isolde got up and went to the kitchen to set the table. She took out the fine china from the cabinet, the one they had received as a wedding gift. She spread a white tablecloth, arranged the cutlery carefully. Maybe a beautiful table setting could at least fix the mood a little. She heard the sound of running water in the shower and pictured Valentine standing under the hot stream, washing away the fatigue of the workday. Before, she sometimes joined him there. They would laugh and splash each other like children. Now even the thought of that felt out of place. Something fundamental had shifted in their relationship, and she couldn't understand when it had happened. 20 minutes later, Valentine came back to the kitchen. He had changed into casual trousers and a polo shirt, his hair neatly styled, the scent of expensive cologne lingering around him. Even at home, he looked as if he were about to attend an important meeting. Not bad, he said, assessing the table setting as he sat down. Isolde served dinner, avoiding his eyes. The cutlets were juicy, the potatoes fragrant, the salad crisp and fresh. Usually, Valentine praised her cooking, but tonight he ate in silence, nodding only occasionally in approval. How was work? Isolde asked, trying to start a conversation. Fine, he replied curtly. We're launching a new project. Lots of meetings with clients. That sounds interesting, she said, though he hadn't given any details. Isolde Valentine put down his fork and looked at her seriously. I want you to understand something. I'm not nitpicking, and I'm not trying to change you. I just want our family to look respectable. That's a normal desire for any man. I understand, she nodded quietly, though inside everything screamed at the unfairness. Good. So tomorrow morning, you'll take care of yourself. Find a good hairdresser, buy quality cosmetics. I'll give you money. Valentine, I have my own salary, Isolde protested. Of course you do. But you shouldn't economize on beauty, it's an investment in our future. After dinner, Valentine went to the living room and turned on the TV. Isolde washed the dishes, turning his words over in her mind. An investment in the future. It sounded reasonable, almost businesslike. Maybe he was right, and she was overreacting? Maybe it was normal, to change a little for the sake of the family? But when she remembered that word, scarecrow, her heart clenched again. No one had ever said something like that to her. Even as an awkward teenager, with braces and acne, her parents had always found something beautiful in her and made sure she knew it. When she finished cleaning up, Isolde went into the living room. Valentine was watching the news, his face focused. She sat down beside him on the couch, hoping that at least now, at the end of the day, they might regain a bit of their usual closeness. Valentine, she began softly, you know I love you very much. I'm willing to change, to make an effort, but what? He turned toward her, a flicker of irritation in his eyes, as though she had interrupted something important. But I need to know that you love me as I am, that it's not just about appearances. Valentine took her hand, and for a moment, Isolde thought everything would be all right. His palm was warm, familiar. Of course I love you, he said. That's exactly why I want you to be the best version of yourself. Isn't that a good thing? No, it's not bad, she agreed, though something inside her protested against the words. The rest of the evening passed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Valentine flipped through the TV channels, occasionally commenting on the news, while Isolde thought about the next day, about getting up early to make herself look presentable, about how she would look with makeup, and whether that would really change anything between them. When they went to bed, Valentine kissed her on the forehead, as he always did, but even in that simple gesture there was a certain distance. Isolde lay in the dark, listening to his steady breathing, trying to understand what exactly had changed between them. When had it started? Why hadn't she seen it sooner? The next morning, waking before the alarm, she saw that Valentine was already up and getting ready for work. He stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie, his reflection looking strangely foreign to her. When he turned to say goodbye, she noticed that same appraising look in his eyes, as if he were already expecting to see a change. Goodbye, darling, he said, kissing her. See you tonight. I hope you'll take my advice. Only after the door closed behind him did Isolde realize that his advice had sounded more like an ultimatum. She went to the hallway mirror and studied her reflection, messy hair, sleepy face without makeup, old pajamas. Did she really look that bad? Was Valentine right? But then she remembered the happy faces of the children at work the day before, how they had shown her their drawings, telling her she was the most beautiful teacher, and a wave of sadness washed over her. The children saw a beauty that her own husband no longer could. All day at work, Isolde thought about the evening, about how she would look, what Valentine would say, whether anything would change between them. During her lunch break, she even stopped by a cosmetics store. She looked over eyeshadows, lipsticks, and foundations. The saleswoman was persuasive, praising the expensive products and promising a dramatic transformation. You're very beautiful by nature, the girl behind the counter said. But with the right makeup, you'll be simply irresistible. Isolde bought several items, spending almost half her salary, and on her way home she kept thinking about the next day. Would she be able to become the kind of wife Valentine wanted? And the most important question, did she even want to be that kind of woman? That evening, when she heard the sound of the key turning in the lock, her heart began to race again. Isolde had deliberately decided not to put on any makeup. She wanted to show Valentine her purchases and discuss with him how exactly he imagined her new image. She thought that if they talked about it calmly, they could find some kind of compromise. But when Valentine saw her in the same simple home look as the day before, his face darkened. I thought we had an agreement, he said coldly. We do, Isolde replied quickly, pulling the cosmetics out of the bag. Look, I bought everything I need. I thought you could help me choose the right style. Valentine picked up one of the bottles, turning it in his hands to examine the label. Not bad, he said approvingly. But this is only the beginning. Tomorrow make sure you book an appointment with a good stylist. And a hairdresser. Valentine Isolde gathered her courage. What if we find some middle ground? I could wear makeup on special occasions, when we go out or to a restaurant, but at home. At home it's especially important to look good, he interrupted. Isolde, why can't you understand something so simple? A wife is the face of her husband. Always. 24 hours a day. There was so much conviction in his voice that for a moment, Isolde doubted herself. Maybe she really didn't understand everything about married life. Maybe her ideas about marriage were too naive. Dinner passed again in a tense silence. Valentine talked about work, new projects, his colleagues, but Isolde only half listened, thinking about the next day, how early she'd have to get up to make herself presentable, how long daily makeup would take, and whether she would even recognize herself a month into such a life. By the way, Valentine said, setting down his fork, we have a company party on Saturday. You'll need to look your best. Maybe buy a new dress? Of course, Isolde nodded, though the thought of spending an evening among her husband's colleagues, pretending to be the happy wife, filled her with dread rather than excitement. And one more thing, Valentine continued. My mother wants to visit in the next few days. She's very strict when it comes to appearance. I hope you'll make a good impression. At the mention of her mother-in-law, Isolde felt a chill inside. Dolores was an elegant and demanding woman. She wouldn't even step out to the grocery store without full makeup and a perfect hairstyle. At the wedding, she had repeatedly made remarks about Isolde's hair and dress, even though both had cost a small fortune. All right, Isolde said again, and that word was beginning to sound like a rehearsed mantra. That night, lying in bed, she thought about how quickly life could change. Just a month ago, she had been confident in herself, in her attractiveness, in her husband's love. Now every glance in the mirror filled her with doubt and unease. Valentine was already asleep, but Isolde couldn't close her eyes. She got up quietly, walked to the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at her reflection. What did Valentine see in her now? What had changed in just 3 weeks since the wedding? She was still the same woman he had fallen in love with. So why was that suddenly not enough? Isolde picked up the shopping bag with her new cosmetics and began to read the instructions on the packaging. Tomorrow morning, she would have to transform into the woman her husband wanted to see. The only question was, would anything of the real Isolde remain in that new version? On the nightstand lay her phone. She picked it up and opened her photo gallery, scrolling through the images from the past few months. There she was at her bachelorette party, laughing, carefree, natural, happy. There with her coworkers, no makeup at all, but glowing with joy. There with the children at work, they hugged her, oblivious to her messy hair and stained clothes. Then she noticed a message from her friend Clarissa, one she had received days ago but never opened. How are you, newlywed? You've disappeared completely. Don't forget your friends. Isolde paused, thinking. Indeed, since the wedding, she had hardly spoken to her friends. Valentine believed that a married woman should spend more time at home, caring for her husband instead of wasting hours on girly get-togethers. And she had agreed, deciding it was normal, priorities had to change. But now, suddenly, she felt an overwhelming urge to call Clarissa, to tell her about her doubts, to hear the voice of someone who knew the real her. Isolde dialed the number, then quickly hung up. It was too late. And what would she even say? That her husband wanted her to look beautiful? That sounded normal. Anyone would understand his point of view. She put the phone away and returned to the bedroom. Valentine was sleeping peacefully. In the moonlight, his face looked young and carefree. She lay down beside him carefully, not to wake him, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow a new life would begin, the life of the proper wife of a successful man. Maybe she would even learn to love this new image. Maybe everything would fall into place. But just before sleep claimed her, a strange thought flashed through her mind. What if she couldn't learn to love this new self? What if, beneath the layers of makeup and perfect hairstyles, she lost something vital, something real? In the morning, Isolde woke to the alarm she had set an hour earlier. Valentine was still asleep, so she quietly slipped into the bathroom. On the counter lay all her new purchases: foundation, powder, eyeshadow, mascara, lipstick. She had studied the instructions the night before. Now it was time to put theory into practice. Her first attempts were clumsy. The foundation went on patchy, the eyeshadow smeared, the mascara clumped her lashes together. She washed it all off and started again. The second attempt was better, but it took nearly 40 minutes. She looked critically at her reflection. She didn't look bad, but somehow not like herself. Her face seemed like a mask behind which the real Isolde was hiding. She gathered her hair into a neat hairstyle and put on a formal blouse instead of her usual t-shirt. When Valentine woke and saw her, his face lit up with a satisfied smile. Now that's more like it, he said, walking up to her and giving her an approving look. See how good you can look when you really want to. Isolde nodded, but something inside her tightened. When you want to, as if before, she had chosen to look bad, out of laziness or defiance. Thank you, she said, her voice tinged with an unexpected sadness. Valentine didn't notice it, or chose not to. He ate breakfast, chatting about his plans for the day, occasionally glancing at his wife with approval. And Isolde thought that this was only the beginning. From now on, every morning would start with the same half-hour ritual, the transformation into a worthy wife. At work, her colleagues immediately noticed the change. You look so elegant today, said the head teacher. Is it a special occasion? Just decided to change a little, Isolde replied, though even to her own ears, the words sounded unconvincing. The children in her group noticed, too. Little Esperanza, who usually ran into her arms with joy, now stopped, hesitant. Senorita Isolde, you seem different, the girl said, studying her teacher with wide eyes. In what way different? Isolde asked, crouching down beside the child. I don't know. Pretty, but not real. Like a doll. Those childish words hurt more than any adult remark. Children always sensed things. They could spot falseness, they didn't know how to pretend and valued sincerity. If a child said she'd become like a doll, then something truly had changed for the worse. All day long, Isolde caught surprised, appraising, sometimes sympathetic looks. It was as if her colleagues were trying to figure out what had happened to the simple, natural woman who had worked beside them only yesterday. In the evening, on her way home, she deliberately lingered, buying ingredients for a special dinner. She wanted to show Valentine that she was trying not only in matters of appearance but in everything else as well. Maybe then he would be pleased, and the closeness between them would return. Valentine came home in a good mood. Seeing the table set and his wife looking as neat as she had in the morning, he even slipped an arm around her waist. Now I remember why I fell in love with you, he said, kissing her cheek. You can be very beautiful when you want to be. Valentine Isolde began carefully. Do you remember you once said you loved me for my naturalness? For not being like the others? I did, he agreed, sitting down at the table. But that was before the wedding. Back then we were just dating, now we're a family. Those are different things. Different? Isolde repeated, not understanding his logic. Of course. In a relationship you can allow yourself a bit of slack. In a family, everyone has roles and responsibilities. My role is to be a successful man, yours is to be the perfect wife. The word perfect weighed on Isolde like a heavy burden. She imagined a life where every day she had to be perfect, look perfect, cook perfectly, behave perfectly, and what would happen if she failed to meet that standard even once? And what if I'm tired sometimes? She asked. What if I just want to relax at home? Valentine looked at her intently, and in his gaze she saw something cold and unyielding. Isolde, we're adults. Being tired isn't a reason to let yourself go. Look at me, every day I look equally good, no matter my mood or how I feel. That's called self-discipline. But you're a man, she objected. It's easier for you. Easier? Valentine laughed, but the laugh sounded unpleasant. Do you think it's easy for me to maintain the image of a successful man every day? Do you think I don't get tired? But I understand that our well-being depends on it. Isolde fell silent, feeling selfish. It was true that Valentine worked hard, provided for their family, took care of himself. And here she was complaining about makeup and a hairstyle. Maybe she really was being too demanding of herself and not appreciating what they had. Dinner passed in a warmer atmosphere. Valentine praised the dishes, talked about work, asked about her day. But Isolde noticed that he looked at her differently, not like a beloved woman, but like a project that had finally begun to yield the proper results. Before bed, as she removed her makeup, she studied her face in the mirror for a long time. Without cosmetics, it seemed pale and tired. Was this really her true look? Was Valentine right? Had she really looked bad? Make an appointment with a good cosmetologist tomorrow, Valentine said, appearing in the bathroom doorway. And with a stylist. We need to define the right image for you. All right, Isolde answered automatically, and that word was already starting to sound like a spell. That night she had a strange dream. She stood before a huge mirror, and her reflection slowly changed. Her hair became perfectly styled, her face covered with flawless makeup, her clothes turned into expensive outfits. But the more perfect the reflection became, the more foreign it seemed. And at some point, the reflection smiled at her with a cold smile and said, "Now you won't recognize me." Isolde woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. Dawn was only just breaking outside, but she could no longer sleep. Beside her, Valentine breathed evenly. His face in sleep looked young and serene. The very man she had once loved for his gentleness and understanding now seemed to have turned into a stern mentor who knew how she should live. Isolde rose quietly and went to the kitchen. Outside, dawn was flaring, the city was waking up, a new day beginning. And this day, like all those to come, was supposed to start with the transformation of plain Isolde into a worthy wife. She took her phone and, to her own surprise, dialed Clarissa's number. Her friend didn't answer right away. It was still early. Isolde? What's wrong? There was worry in Clarissa's voice. Clarissa, I'm sorry it's so early, it's just, can I come over? I need to talk. Of course. Come. I'll make coffee. Isolde left a note for Valentine saying she had gone to a friend's and would be back by lunchtime. Maybe talking to Clarissa would help her sort out her feelings, to understand whether she was right in her doubts or whether she was just reacting too sharply to normal changes in married life. On the bus, watching the city slide by outside the window, Isolde thought that only a month ago she had been absolutely certain of her happiness. And now each day brought new doubts and questions she had no answers for. And the most important question was this: where is the line at which love turns into control, and care into demands to conform to someone else's expectations? The bus stopped at her stop, and Isolde got off, heading toward her friend's building. Ahead lay a conversation that could change everything or, on the contrary, finally convince her that she was wrong and that Valentine only wanted what was best for them both. But in any case, it was no longer possible to remain silent. Clarissa met Isolde at the door of her cozy studio apartment, in a bathrobe, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. The friends hadn't seen each other since the wedding, and now Clarissa stared in surprise at Isolde's carefully made-up face, neat hairstyle, and severe blouse. "Wow, you've changed," Clarissa said, hugging her friend. "A real businesswoman. Come in, tell me what happened." They settled on a small sofa surrounded by books and magazines. Clarissa's apartment had always been a bit chaotic, but very alive, manuscripts, photos, souvenirs from business trips everywhere. It held the very naturalness Isolde was already beginning to forget. "Clarissa, be honest," Isolde began, clutching her cup. "How did I look before? Before the wedding? Was it really that bad?" Clarissa nearly choked on her coffee. "What kind of question is that? You were always beautiful. Naturally beautiful. What happened?" "Valentine says I need to take better care of myself. That the wife of a successful man can't look any old way." "Any old way?" Clarissa frowned. "Are you serious, Isolde? Is this the same Valentine who, the last time we met, spent 2 hours saying how special you were precisely because you weren't hung up on your looks?" Isolde nodded, feeling a knot of confusion grow inside her. "He's changed since the wedding. Or maybe I just didn't know him well. Now he wants me always to be made up, with my hair done, and nice clothes. Even at home?" Clarissa set down her cup and looked closely at her friend. "Even at home," Isolde nodded, almost in a whisper. "Isolde, do you want that?" "I don't know," Isolde admitted. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I really did relax too much. We're a family now, everyone has their duties." "What duties? Being a doll?" Outrage crept into Clarissa's voice. "Isolde, listen to yourself. You're speaking with someone else's words." Isolde stayed silent, torn between the urge to agree with her friend and a strange need to defend Valentine. He wasn't asking for more attention to her appearance for no reason. He worked hard, had a responsible position, colleagues could judge him by his wife. "You see, he has an important job," she said at last. "A reputation, a status. I don't want to let him down." "And he doesn't worry about letting you down?" Clarissa shot back. "Isolde, do you hear yourself? You're justifying a man who called you a scarecrow." "He didn't call me," Isolde began, but fell silent, remembering her husband's exact words. "He did. I can see it on your face." Clarissa stood up and took a small album from the cupboard, opening it to a page with photos from a year ago. "Look at yourself. Here you are at my birthday, remember? No makeup, your hair just down, ordinary clothes, but look at your eyes, your smile. You're glowing from within." Isolde took the album and studied the photo for a long time. And it was a completely different girl, relaxed, happy, real. Back then it never even occurred to her to worry about how she looked. She simply lived and enjoyed life. "And now look at yourself in the mirror," Clarissa said softly. Isolde raised her eyes and saw her reflection in the wardrobe's mirrored door, flawless makeup, neat hairstyle, a severe blouse. Beautiful, but cold, as if she were looking at a stranger. "I don't recognize myself," she whispered. "Isolde, do you remember what you told me 6 months ago? That Valentine loved the real you, that with him you could be yourself?" Isolde remembered. Back then, that had seemed the most important thing, the chance to be sincere, not to play a role, not to strive to meet someone else's expectations. Valentine had valued her naturalness, claimed he was tired of fake women, and now he demanded precisely the fakery he had once been weary of. Maybe people change, she said uncertainly. Maybe he realized he wants a different kind of wife. And do you want to be a different kind of wife? Clarissa asked point blank. The question caught Isolde off guard. Did she? On the one hand, it was pleasant to see approval in her husband's eyes, to feel that she matched his idea of the ideal spouse. On the other hand, every morning, looking in the mirror, she recognized herself less and less, as if the real Isolde was hiding under a layer of cosmetics, and only a pretty shell was on display. I don't know, she answered honestly. I'm confused, Clarissa. He says reasonable things, everyone in a family has a role, and a wife should be her husband's adornment. An adornment? Clarissa shook her head. Isolde, you're not an ornament. You're a living person, with your own feelings, thoughts, needs. But if I love him, aren't I supposed to try to please him? Trying to please and completely changing yourself to fit someone else's demands are two different things. Love accepts a person as they are. Isolde thought about it. Did Valentine accept her as she was? Or did he love only the version he had created? And what if he's right? She asked. What if I really was a slob, and now I've become better? Clarissa took her hands in hers. Isolde, you work with children. Children are the most honest critics in the world. Have they ever told you that you look bad? Isolde suddenly recalled the little one's reactions to her new look. Esperanza had said she looked like a doll. Other children had also stared in puzzlement, as if a stranger stood before them instead of their teacher. On the contrary, she said quietly, yesterday a girl said, now you're pretty, but not real. Children don't lie, Clarissa said gently. They sense falseness better than adults. The friends sat in silence for a long time, each lost in her thoughts. Outside, the city hummed, life went on as usual, while Isolde tried to grasp exactly where and when she had lost herself. Clarissa, what if I try talking to him? She asked at last. Explain what I feel. Of course, try. But be ready for him not to understand. Or not to want to understand. What do you mean? Isolde looked at her friend, waiting for an explanation. Clarissa paused, choosing her words. Isolde, I recently wrote an article about psychological pressure in relationships. You know what's interesting? It often starts with demands to change your appearance. First the hairstyle, then the clothes, then the behavior. And then a person looks back and realizes there's nothing left of themselves. You think Valentine? Isolde couldn't finish the sentence. I think you need to listen to yourself, to your feelings. If every morning you can barely recognize yourself in the mirror, that's a warning bell. Isolde checked the time. It was almost noon, she needed to head home soon. Valentine didn't like her being late, especially without warning. I have to go, she said, getting up. Isolde, Clarissa hugged her goodbye. Promise me you'll be honest with yourself. And remember, you can always come to me. On the way home, Isolde thought about the conversation. Clarissa's words sank deep, making her doubt the path she'd chosen. At the same time, she felt guilty toward Valentine. Had she really discussed their family problems with an outsider? Had she really allowed Clarissa to criticize her husband? At home, Valentine was already waiting, the table set for lunch. He was in a good mood, talking about their weekend plans. How's Clarissa? He asked in passing. She's fine, Isolde answered, trying to keep her voice even. Working a lot. Good thing you didn't linger, Valentine said, giving her an appraising look. Your makeup smudged a bit, but overall you look presentable. Isolde touched her face reflexively. Did she really look bad? Or was Valentine just nitpicking? Valentine, she began cautiously, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Do you remember when we met? What didn't you like back then? Valentine smiled, but the smile was strangely distant. You were a sweet girl, modest, quiet, good material to be shaped. Material to be shaped? Isolde repeated, feeling a chill inside. Well, yes. You understand that a man always molds a woman to suit himself. It's a natural process. The word struck like a slap. So from the very start he had seen not a person, but a project to be carried out. He hadn't loved her true self, he had loved the opportunity to make her into what he wanted. And what if I don't want to be molded? She asked softly. Valentine frowned. Isolde, what kind of strange questions are these? You're a smart girl, you should understand that a family is work. Everyone has to work on themselves. But why should only I change? Why not you? Because I'm already a fully formed person, he replied with the certainty of something obvious. And you're still forming. I'm helping you become better. Better for whom? For you or for me? Valentine set down his fork and looked closely at his wife. Isolde, you're acting strange today. Did Clarissa say something to you? There was suspicion in his voice, and Isolde realized the conversation was taking a dangerous turn. No, nothing in particular, she said quickly. I'm just thinking about our life. What life? Our life is excellent. A good apartment, stable income, prospects. I don't see what there is to think about. About whether we're happy, Isolde said even more quietly. Happiness is a luxury, Valentine cut her off. Stability and correctness are more important. After those words, Isolde finally understood they were speaking different languages. For her, happiness was the foundation of life. For Valentine, it was a secondary bonus to a properly constructed existence. The rest of the day passed in a tense atmosphere. Valentine didn't return to the topic, but Isolde sensed his wariness, as if he understood that a crack had appeared in his perfectly built system. That evening, lying in bed, Isolde thought about Clarissa's words, that children don't lie, that she had become pretty but not real, and the most frightening thought of all, that from the very beginning, Valentine had seen not a woman he loved, but raw material for his ideal wife project. Maybe tomorrow she'd find the strength to continue the conversation. Or maybe she'd realize that Valentine was right and that she was simply overthinking. But one thing was clear, she could no longer live in constant inner conflict. Outside, the summer day was fading, and in Isolde's soul a decision was slowly ripening, one that could change her whole life. 3 weeks passed after that talk with Clarissa, and Isolde was horrified to realize her friend's words had been prophetic. Valentine's demands grew each day, like an insatiable abyss that could not be filled. Now he controlled not only her general appearance but the details, what shade of lipstick she should wear, how to style her hair, which clothing colors he liked. That lipstick is too bright, he said yesterday morning, critically scanning her face. You're not going out on the street corner. Something more modest but expressive. Isolde obediently wiped off the lipstick and applied another, more neutral. But that option didn't satisfy Valentine either. Now you look sick. Find the golden mean. She spent another 20 minutes trying different options until she earned his approval. She was late for work, but Valentine was satisfied. The same thing happened again this morning. Isolde got up at 5:30 to get herself ready, but even that wasn't enough. Valentine still found something to criticize. Your hairstyle is too strict, he declared, watching her twist her hair into a neat bun. You look like a librarian. Let your hair down. But yesterday you said loose hair looks sloppy, Isolde protested cautiously. Yesterday was yesterday. Today is a different day, a different mood. A woman should sense what a man needs in a given moment. Isolde took her hair down and shaped it into waves as best she could. That took another half hour, but Valentine nodded with the air of a man who had finally seen some sensible action. Better. But next time, do it right from the start. At the childcare center, her colleagues had already grown used to her new look, but the children still reacted strangely. Little Augusto, usually an open and affectionate boy, now kept his distance. Señorita Isolde, why are you always sad now? He asked once during a clay modeling activity. I'm not sad, Augusto, Isolde answered, trying to smile. No, you are. Your eyes are sad, even when you smile. Like my mom's when she argues with my dad. The child's perceptiveness stunned Isolde. Was her inner state really that obvious? She went to the washroom mirror and studied herself carefully. The makeup was flawless, the hairstyle tidy, but there was real sorrow in her eyes. As if, behind the pretty mask, a tired and bewildered woman was hiding. That evening, Valentine came home in an especially fault-finding mood. Isolde greeted him the way she thought was ideal, fresh makeup, neat hairstyle, a dressy outfit. But Valentine's face darkened the moment he stepped through the door. What is that expression? He asked without even saying hello. What expression? Isolde faltered. You look like you're at a funeral. Is it really so hard to greet your husband with a joyful smile? Isolde tried to smile, but it came out strained and unnatural. God, that's even worse, Valentine said irritably. You're an intelligent woman, can't you learn how to express emotions properly? Valentine, I'm trying, Isolde said quietly. But sometimes I just get tired. Tired of what? Of looking beautiful? Of living in a nice apartment and lacking nothing? Isolde stayed silent, realizing that anything she said would be the wrong thing. Valentine went into the living room, shaking his head in displeasure. You know what a colleague told me today? He began, settling into an armchair. That his wife always greets him like it's the first day they met. Every day is a little holiday. And what do I see? A sour face and constant excuses. I'm not making excuses, Isolde countered. I'm just trying to understand what you want from me. I want a wife, not a housemaid who does her duties grudgingly. Do you feel the difference? Isolde felt a difference, but not the one he meant. She felt herself drifting farther from who she was with each passing day, felt something vital inside her dimming under the weight of constant demands and criticism. Over dinner, Valentine continued his instructions. Tomorrow we have an important corporate event. All the top executives will be there with their wives. I don't want to be embarrassed by how you look. I understand, Isolde nodded. What exactly do you want me to wear? The black dress, the one we bought last week. Put your hair up in an elegant bun. Makeup bright but not vulgar. And most importantly, smile. Smile naturally. Smile naturally. When inside everything was clenched with tension, Isolde nodded, mentally mapping out her prep for the next day. She would have to get up even earlier to manage it all. And another thing, Valentine added, try to be interesting in conversation. The wives of top executives are usually very well educated. And I'm not educated? Isolde couldn't help herself. Educated, but not polished. You lack refinement, social experience. You need to work on yourself. After dinner, Isolde locked herself in the bathroom and stared at her reflection for a long time. There was a small crack in the mirror on her vanity, appeared a few days ago when she accidentally dropped a bottle of foundation. The crack ran right through the center of the reflection, splitting her face in half. Fitting, Isolde thought. As if my personality has cracked too. She began removing her makeup with practiced motions, clearing her face of the day's mask. With each layer of cosmetics wiped away, a different woman appeared in the mirror, pale, tired, with dark circles under her eyes. The real Isolde, whom Valentine was never supposed to see. She wondered, as she patted her face dry, when she had last laughed from the heart. When she had last felt joy at something simple and natural. A silly cartoon episode used to make her giggle, playing with the children at work, a dumb joke from a friend. Now even a smile took effort. Her phone lay on the nightstand. Isolde picked it up and scrolled through her messages. Clarissa had been writing for 3 days straight, inviting her to an exhibition, to the movies, or just to talk. But Isolde hadn't replied. Valentine disapproved of her friendship with Clarissa, saying Clarissa was a bad influence on his wife. She's 30 and still lives like a student, he'd say. No seriousness, no responsibility. You don't want to be like that, do you? Isolde didn't. But now, looking at her friend's cheerful messages, she suddenly realized she envied Clarissa's freedom, the freedom to be herself without glancing over her shoulder at someone else's expectations. In the bedroom, Valentine was already lying down, reading something on his tablet. Isolde slipped into bed quietly so as not to disturb him. Isolde, he said without looking up from the screen, tomorrow after the corporate event we'll stop by my mother's. She wants to see how you've changed. Isolde's heart clenched. Her mother-in-law was even more demanding than Valentine himself. At their last meeting, she'd spent 2 hours lecturing Isolde on how the wife of a successful man should look and behave. All right, Isolde answered softly. And try to make a good impression. My mother is very attentive to details. Isolde closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun with the next day's tasks, demands, expectations. She had to be perfect at the corporate event, then perfect as a daughter-in-law afterward. And so on, every day, every minute. When would there be time just to be herself? She remembered little Augusto's words about her sad eyes, and suddenly realized the boy was right. She was sad. And with each day she grew sadder, losing herself in the endless chase after someone else's standards of perfection. Outside, the night city slowly drifted to sleep, while Isolde lay wide-eyed, wondering how much longer she could live like this. Was there a limit to the pressure a human soul could endure before it finally broke? The corporate event passed in a blur. Isolde smiled, made small talk, accepted compliments from Valentine's colleagues about her appearance. She was the perfect wife of a successful manager, elegant, charming, correct in every respect. But inside, it felt as if a fire of exhaustion and despair was burning. You look wonderful today, Valentine said in the car on the way to his mother's. Petrov's wife was even jealous of your dress. Thank you, Isolde answered mechanically, staring out at the streetlights sliding by. Just smile more. Sometimes it seems like you're bored. Isolde wasn't bored. She was slowly dying inside, but there was no way to explain that to Valentine. He saw only the outer shell and was pleased with the results of his efforts. Dolores met them in her immaculate apartment, where everything was in its place and a faint scent of expensive perfume hung in the air. She ran an assessing gaze over Isolde from head to toe, like a general inspecting a soldier before a parade. Not bad, she pronounced. The dress fits well, the hairstyle is neat, but there's something wrong with your face. What exactly? Valentine tensed. Your expression is lifeless. A woman should radiate joy, especially a young wife. Isolde tried to arrange her features into joy, but Dolores shook her head. You see, Valentine, that's something to work on. A woman is a man's mirror. If she looks unhappy, people will think her husband treats her badly. I'll try, Isolde said quietly. Trying isn't enough. You must work on yourself every single day. At your age, I used to get up at 5 in the morning to make myself presentable for my husband, and I never complained about being tired. The next hour passed in non-stop lectures from her mother-in-law about how a proper wife should look and behave. Isolde nodded, agreed, promised to do better, but inside, a feeling of suffocation kept growing. It seemed as if the room were shrinking and the air growing thinner. At home, Valentine was in high spirits. Mother is right about your facial expression, he said, pouring himself a whiskey. You need to work on your emotionality. Maybe you should sign up for acting classes? Valentine, can I ask you something? Isolde mustered her courage. Of course, dear. Do you love me? Valentine raised his eyebrows in surprise. What a strange question. Of course I do. Otherwise, why would I spend so much time on your improvement? And which me do you love, the real me, or the one you're creating? Valentine set down his glass and looked closely at his wife. Isolde, you're philosophical today. Love isn't about real or not real. Love is when you want someone to become the best version of themselves. And what if I don't want to become that version? You don't want to be beautiful, well-groomed, a worthy companion to a successful man? I want to be myself. Valentine laughed, but the laugh sounded cold. Yourself? And who are you, Isolde? When I met you, you were nobody. A modest daycare teacher with no ambition, no style, no understanding of how the world works. I gave you a chance to become something more. The words hit like a slap. Isolde felt something inside her finally break. Nobody? She whispered. Well, not nobody, exactly. But your potential was undeveloped. I helped you bring it out. Valentine, do you hear yourself? You're denying my personality, my feelings, my desires. I'm helping you find the right desires, he replied with a zealot's conviction. Isolde, you're a smart girl. Look at our life objectively, a nice apartment, a stable income, social status. Isn't that worth a few small efforts on your part? Small? Isolde stood up from the couch, feeling something hot and uncontrollable rise within her. Valentine, I get up at 5 to spend 2 hours getting myself ready. I'm afraid to smile the wrong way, look the wrong way, say the wrong thing. I don't recognize myself in the mirror. Those are small efforts. You're exaggerating, Valentine waved her off. All women take care of themselves. Not like this. Not to the point of losing themselves. Valentine put down his glass and stood. Something hard and cold appeared in his eyes. Isolde, I can see someone has turned you against me. Clarissa, I suppose. I told you she's a bad influence. Clarissa has nothing to do with this. These are my own feelings. Your feelings? Valentine stepped closer, and Isolde involuntarily backed away. And my feelings don't matter to you? I don't like having a wife who looks any old way. I'm ashamed of your appearance in front of my colleagues. Then why did you marry me? Isolde cried, her voice breaking. Why did you pretend to love me as I am? I didn't pretend. I loved your potential, and I'm realizing it. You're the one breaking me. Finally, tears streamed down her face, washing away the carefully applied makeup. You're turning me into a doll that has to match your idea of the ideal wife. Valentine looked at her tear-streaked face with disgust. Look at yourself, mascara smeared, eyes red. Is that your real beauty? Isolde went to the hallway mirror and saw her reflection. Yes, the makeup had run, her face was flushed from crying. But for the first time in months, she saw something alive and genuine in her eyes. Yes, she said firmly. This is me, the real me. Then I don't need a wife like that, Valentine said coldly. Silence fell between them, heavy and ringing. Isolde looked at the man she loved and didn't recognize him. When had he become so cruel? Or had he always been this way, simply hiding it well? All right, she said at last, her voice strangely calm. Then you won't have her. Valentine frowned, not understanding. What does that mean? It means I'm leaving. Leaving where? You're my wife. I was your project, Isolde said, heading to the bedroom to pack. But the project is closed. Valentine moved to follow her. Isolde, don't talk nonsense. You're not going anywhere. Where would you go? To Clarissa's shabby little apartment? I'll go to my parents, Isolde replied, pulling out a suitcase. To people who love the real me. Your parents live in the provinces, they have no money. You're used to a different standard of living. Isolde packed a few things that remained from her former life. Most of her clothes Valentine had made her throw out or replace with something more appropriate. You know what I've realized? She said without turning around. Standard of living isn't about money and status. It's about whether you can breathe freely. Pretty words, Valentine said mockingly. We'll see what tune you sing in a month when you're counting pennies. Isolde turned to him. And let's see how you do without a doll you can dress up and repaint to your liking. Maybe you should buy a real doll? She certainly won't object to your demands. Valentine paled with anger. You'll regret this decision. In a week you'll crawl back on your knees. No, Isolde said calmly, closing the suitcase. I won't, because I finally remembered who I am. She went to the bathroom and looked at the cracked mirror. The crack split her reflection in two, one half of her face with smeared makeup, the other already clean. Symbolic, Isolde thought. The old life in the new. The fake in the real. She took a cotton pad and wiped off the rest of the makeup. In the mirror appeared a familiar face, pale, tired, but alive. For the first time in months, she recognized herself. Isolde, Valentine stood in the bathroom doorway. Don't do anything foolish. We can talk this through, find a compromise. What compromise? She asked, turning to him. That I'll wear makeup every other day? If it's that important to you, you can sometimes be at home without makeup. Within reason. Isolde shook her head. Valentine, you don't understand. It's not about the makeup. It's that you don't accept me as I am. And I can't pretend to be someone else anymore. But I love you. You love your fantasy of me, the image you created in your head. You've never even seen the real me. Valentine was silent, and in that silence was a bitter truth. He really didn't see her, only raw material for his ideal wife project. Isolde picked up her suitcase and walked to the door. Valentine followed her, but didn't try to stop her. Is that your final decision? He asked at the door. Yes, Isolde said, putting on her jacket. And you know what? It's the first decision in months that I've made myself. She opened the door and stepped into the stairwell. Behind her, the door of their apartment, of their shared life, their broken love, clicked shut. Outside, it was a warm September evening. Isolde walked the familiar streets toward the bus station, dragging her suitcase and feeling a strange lightness in her chest. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe freely, without fearing someone would judge her breathing as wrong. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Clarissa. How are you, sunshine? Haven't heard from you in a while. Isolde stopped under a streetlight and typed a reply. I'm fine. Really fine. I finally remembered who I am. The answer came almost immediately. And who is that? Isolde smiled her first genuine smile in a long time and wrote, a person. Just a living person. The bus to her hometown was leaving in an hour. Isolde bought a ticket and sat in the waiting hall, thinking about what lay ahead. Uncertainty, difficulties, perhaps loneliness. But all of that was better than the slow death of the soul in a gilded cage of someone else's expectations. She took out her phone and looked at her reflection in the black screen. No makeup, a simple hairstyle, ordinary clothes. And for the first time in months, she liked what she saw. Hello, she whispered to her reflection. Long time no see. Her parents' home greeted Isolde with the smell of fresh bread and her mother's embrace. Consuelo didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply hugged her daughter and led her into the kitchen, where the kettle was quietly simmering on the stove and a warm apple pie lay on the table. The simplicity of the moment felt like a true miracle to Isolde after months of tension and pretense. Mom, she whispered, burying her face in her mother's shoulder like she used to as a child. Hush, my dear, Consuelo said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. It's all right. You're home now. For the first 3 days, Isolde simply caught up on sleep and tried to recover. She didn't wear makeup, dressed in her old clothes that had been left in her childhood room, and helped her mother around the house. Simple things, washing dishes, watering plants, cooking lunch, felt like real meditation after months of living under constant control. You know what I like the most? She said one morning on the 4th day. What, sweetheart? That you don't ask why I came back. You don't lecture me about marital duties. Consuelo set down her cup and looked at her daughter intently. Isolde, I can see something's happened to you. You came here without your husband, with just one suitcase, and there's such tiredness in your eyes, as if you haven't slept in months. Do you think I need to be a psychic to figure it out? Mom, what if I told you I don't want to be married anymore? I tell you that you're a grown woman, and you have the right to make decisions about your own life. Isolde felt something soften inside her. When was the last time someone had trusted her to make her own choices? Valentine wanted to turn me into the perfect wife, she began carefully. He controlled how I looked, how I acted, even my emotions. And how did that make you feel? Like I was dying, piece by piece, losing something important every single day. Consuelo nodded, as though that explained everything. You know, when you were little, you had that doll, remember Beatrice? Isolde smiled at the memory of her favorite toy. Of course I remember. Well, one day you decided to make her prettier. You colored her lips with a marker, cut her hair, dressed her in her best outfit. And then you ran to me in tears and said, she's not my Beatrice anymore, she's some strange doll. And what did you tell me then? That beauty isn't what we put on from the outside. Real beauty shines from within. And if someone tries to change you from the outside, it means they can't see your inner light. Isolde fell silent, letting her mother's words sink in. Valentine had never seen her inner light, he had only seen the outer shell, something he could endlessly improve. Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking her thoughts. Valentine's name flashed on the screen. Isolde stared at it, uncertain whether to answer. Pick up, her mother said quietly. You need to talk. Isolde Valentine's voice sounded strange, there was an unfamiliar uncertainty in it. Where are you? At my parents'. When are you coming home? I'm not coming home, Valentine. I told you that. A long pause. Then he spoke again, his tone softer. Isolde, I realize I was too demanding. Maybe I went overboard with my advice about your appearance. Let's meet and talk it through calmly. Advice? Isolde felt the familiar irritation rise. Valentine, you controlled every step I took, every emotion I showed. I wanted what was best, for both of us. No, you wanted what was convenient for you. You wanted me to fit your picture of the perfect wife. Isolde, I'm willing to change. We can find a compromise. The word compromise stung her. It was always she who had to compromise, always she who had to bend to meet his demands. Valentine, answer me honestly, she said. Do you remember what I was like when we first met? What did you like about that girl? Silence. And in that silence, Isolde understood that he truly didn't remember, or remembered, but thought that version of her was wrong. You were sweet. You needed guidance. Guidance, Isolde repeated. So from the start, you didn't see a partner in me, you saw a project to be fixed. Not a project. Just you had potential. I helped you realize it. Valentine, you turned a living person into a doll. And now you're surprised the doll came to life and walked away. Isolde, please. Let's meet. Talk in person. Isolde looked over at her mother, who was humming an old tune while making lunch. Such a simple, peaceful picture of domestic happiness, no tension, no pressure to meet anyone's standards. All right, she said finally. We'll meet, but not at home. Somewhere neutral. They agreed to meet at a cafe in the city center 2 days later. Valentine agreed to come, and there was a note of hope in his voice. Mom, Isolde said, putting down her phone, what if I'm wrong? What if I really was ungrateful? He did a lot for me. My dear, Consuelo replied gently, ask yourself one thing, were you happy? No, Isolde answered without hesitation. There's your answer. A person can shower you with gold, but if your soul aches, that kind of care is worth nothing. The next day, Isolde went to the kindergarten where she used to work. The director, Rosario, was delighted to see her. Isolde, how wonderful that you stopped by. The children still remember you. Can I see them? I've missed them so much. In the group room, Isolde saw many familiar faces. The children had grown and changed, but their sincerity remained the same. Little Esperanza, who used to live in the city when Isolde worked there, was now staying with her grandmother in town. Señorita Isolde, the girl shouted joyfully, running into her arms. You've become real again. What do you mean, real? Isolde smiled. Well, not like a doll. Like you again. Children never lied. They saw what adults often missed, the genuine person beneath all the appearances. The day of the meeting with Valentine came quickly. Isolde arrived at the cafe first, chose a table by the window, and ordered a coffee. She didn't wear makeup, tied her hair in a simple ponytail, and wore ordinary jeans and a sweater. For the first time in months, she looked the way she wanted, not the way someone else demanded. Valentine appeared about 10 minutes later. He looked impeccable, as always, but Isolde noticed dark circles under his eyes and a certain tension in his movements. When he saw her, he stopped for a moment, as if he didn't recognize her. "Hi," he said, sitting down across from her. "Hello, Valentine. You look different." "I look the way I want to." Valentine ordered an espresso and sat in silence for a while, studying his wife. There was disappointment in his gaze. "Isolde, didn't you like being beautiful?" "I like being myself. Beautiful or not, that's secondary. But you do understand that appearance matters, especially for a woman." Isolde shook her head. "Valentine, you still don't get it. It's not about appearance. It's about you not accepting me as I am." "I do accept you. I just want you to be the best version of yourself." "Whose best version? Yours or mine?" Valentine frowned. "What's the difference?" "The difference," said Isolde quietly, "is that my best version is me living in harmony with myself, and yours is me living up to your idea of what a wife should be." "Isolde, I'm willing to compromise," he said after a pause. "You don't have to wear makeup at home on weekends." That sentence made everything clear. Valentine was offering her concessions, small privileges within a system of total control. But the system itself remained unchanged. "Valentine, do you love me?" "Of course I do." "For what?" He hesitated, and the pause stretched on. Isolde realized he couldn't answer the simplest of questions. "For being a good girl, kind, intelligent. And yet you feel the need to keep fixing me?" "Not fixing, improving." "Valentine, if someone needs to be improved, it means you think they're flawed. Can you love a flawed person?" "Yes. But love means wanting to help them become better." "Or," Isolde said softly, "it means accepting them as they are." They sat facing each other, and Isolde understood they were speaking entirely different languages. For Valentine, love was a project to perfect one's partner. For her, it was acceptance of a person as a whole, with all their quirks and imperfections. "Valentine," she said calmly, "I've decided to file for divorce." "Isolde, think it over. We can still fix this. You can change your attitude toward me." "Of course. But can you accept me as I am, right now? Without makeup, in simple clothes, with my own views on life?" Valentine looked at her and, to his credit, answered honestly. "That would be difficult." "There's your answer," Isolde said, standing up from the table. "Valentine, I wish you to find a woman who'll want to become your version of the perfect wife. As for me, I want to stay myself." "Isolde, wait." She turned around. "What will happen to us? To our marriage?" "Our marriage ended the moment you called me a scarecrow. I just didn't realize it right away." Isolde left the cafe and slowly walked along the familiar streets of her hometown. The autumn air was fresh and cool, the leaves rustled under her feet, just like in childhood. She felt light, as if she had finally shrugged off a heavy burden. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Isolde returned to her job at the kindergarten, rented a small apartment, and began a new life. Sometimes she felt sad, sometimes lonely, but she never again experienced the suffocating feeling she had known during her marriage to Valentine. One evening, on her way home from work, she ran into Clarissa, who was visiting. "How are you, sunshine?" her friend asked, hugging her. "I'm good," Isolde replied, and this time, it was true. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "The divorce. Losing your stability?" Isolde thought for a moment. "You know, I've realized something. Stability that kills your soul isn't stability, it's a slow death. Life, even with its challenges, but in harmony with yourself, that's what real life is." "And love? You don't believe in love anymore?" "I do. But now I know, real love doesn't try to change you. It accepts and supports you." They sat together in a small cafe, and Isolde told her friend about her plans, her work, and the children. She was happy with a quiet, simple joy, the kind you can only feel when you're at peace with yourself. "And Valentine?" Clarissa asked. "What about him?" "I heard he's seeing someone," Isolde said. "I hope he's found a woman who wants to be the way he envisions her." "And you? Are you planning to meet someone?" Isolde smiled. "I am. But next time, I'll look for someone who loves me for laughing at silly movies, for not being afraid to get messy playing with kids, for sometimes forgetting to brush my hair because I got lost in a book, someone who sees beauty in my natural self, not flaws to be corrected." Evening was falling outside the cafe windows, the city lights began to glow, and Isolde felt that life was only just beginning. She had regained the most important thing, the right to be herself. And that was worth more than any stability, any status, any external achievement. At home, before bed, she looked in the mirror, her simple face without makeup, a little tired after a long day. but in her eyes shone something alive and genuine, something that months of pressure and control hadn't managed to destroy. "Hello," she said to her reflection. "It's good to have you back." And the mirror smiled back at her.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.